Welcome to the live stream, everybody. We've got Sarah here as well. We've got John this is, of course, in YouTube. I can see what's going on in YouTube. If you're watching on LinkedIn, thank you so much for being here today. I'm a little under the weather. You might hear that a little bit in my voice. It's what happens when you are doing a lot of things, and it's the change of the year, and your family members get a little bit sick, and you're kind of going full bore marketing a book, this book, for example. I'll be taking lots of sips of coffee as we go through our conversation today. Excellent. Good to see. We've got procurement guide, who I think that's Catherine, from what I can tell from here. And we're gonna do things a little bit differently. This is an episode of the podcast that's coming up, and normally I would bring in the guest, which I'm going to do right now. And there he is, but he's not the guest. Tim, before we get started, why don't you tell me and tell everybody here who's a lot of people here will know you, who you are, and then that way we can kind of dive in.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Tim O'Hare. I'm a member of Mike's TimeCrafting Trust community. I'm based in Plymouth in the UK. I had my first contact with Mike about a year ago. Actually, it was. So the book that we're going to talk about has been in the birthing process for a bit longer than that. So that's me.
I'm gonna get my camera a little bit sorted more, but that's okay. This is the thing about going live, right? So I'm gonna go main here. But Tim, you first off, obviously, ooh, that's not good. The wonders of live streaming. Let's bring me back to where I want to be here. We'll go wide. There we go, and then we just have to move me over. Here we go. I'll just do this, make it a little bit easier. There. That's what we want to do. All right. Good to see Gloria Jean here as well. Janet is here. We got Chase in the house, Ksenia, everybody here. This is great. So again, this episode's going live in a little over a week from today, and I'm excited. So if you have questions or anything like that, Tim can't see them. You're watching the live stream too on mute, right?
I can see them. Yeah.
So you can see them. So I will keep my eye on them as well, just in case I see something. But for the most part, this is going to be Tim's show. So I'm ready to go. If you're ready to go,
I'll do the intro then. Shall I do the intro? Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. So here we go. Ready? We'll count in. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim O'Hare, and Mike Vardy is about to have a productive conversation with me.
Okay, so
it's great, Mike. It's have you on your own show to talk about your book, The Productivity Diet, that's just recently come out. How does it feel to be on your own show?
It feels interesting because I've been interviewed before, and this is actually, I think, only the second interview for the book so far as of this recording. So I've already been interviewed by my friend Natalie, and then later today. So this will be I don't know when that episode will come up, but Eric from Beyond the To-Do List is going to have me on. So the tour for this book, The Productivity Diet, is now underway, and I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you able to talk to us all about your work. I was wondering, Mike, whether when you set out to write the book, this particular book, because I know it's not your first one, did you have a particular reader in mind? What were they like?
So that's a great question, Tim, because for the longest time, I was trying to write a book that would appeal to everybody. I think everybody can benefit from, improving their relationship with time and cultivating, a productive mindset. But the problem is, it's that old Ricky Nelson song, you can't please, you try to write for everybody and you write for nobody, I think is there's like a paraphrasing in that song of, and it took me a while to kind of really hone in on who this was for. And it goes back to another piece. Write the book that you want to see in the world. Write the book that you could have used a number of years ago. And the Productivity Diet has been it's been in the writing process for a number of years under different titles and so on and so forth. And I think the biggest struggle I had with that wasn't just who's it for, but where do I finally draw a line in the sand and say, this is the framework? This is, this is what it looks like. And so I think the book was for Mike of a decade ago, right? Mike of, when even longer, when Mike got into the game, like what if, what would a, what would a productive life look like in bits and pieces? Because that's how you basically build it. You don't build it all at once. For
Yeah,
somebody who is a father of two, self-employed, along with his wife who's self-employed, middle class knowledge worker type. And that's kind of the way I went. And oddly enough, that's also who I've coached for a number of years. It's, I think, the crux of so many of the, and maybe not be the pure avatar, quote unquote, of the members of the Time Crafting Trust community, but I think there's a lot of time management books out there for the people who don't have kids and don't have a lot of external
yeah,
pressures, and they're focused only on work. Like, how do I be more productive at work? And
yeah,
I wanted to write something that was for your whole life, right? Not just professionally but personally. And so, I set out to write it. It took me a while, and I this is what was born is this book, and this is more of the how to that I've been waiting to get out there. There's a lot more why-to books to come, I'm sure. But
mm,
this one, for initially, was called Time Crafting, and before, I think, the method that I taught was called the Now Year Formula. Then it became the Now Year Method. So there's been a lot of evolutions, and this is me, finally staking my claim with a book
yeah.
that's like, here is my framework. Here's my, follow it to the degree that you are willing to follow it, because I don't believe that it's a one size fits all, kind of
Well, and
scenario.
that is something very much that's part of the framework. I mean, I picked out three like key elements. In fact, it's interesting you use the word framework because there's a point in the book where you talk about productivity can be a system often, but that becomes a set of rules. Then you describe it as a set of skills or a skill that you
Hmm.
can develop. And I, at that point, wrote my own note that you could think of it as a framework or a philosophy. And you didn't use those words in the book, I don't think. But later on in the book, you talk about productivity as a practice. And I think that really did resonate because I think the beauty of calling it a practice is that it immediately removes the idea that it's got to be right, it's got to be perfect. And as you said in your piece there, you writing it for what you might have been like 10 or 15 years ago, but I guess you're still
It,
changing the way and you're still learning from it.
it is, and I can learn from. There's still some stuff that's fundamental, right? And those things have stood the test of time, but there's always going to be pieces that evolve. For example, in the book, I talk about time theming, which is one of the elements of time crafting. And I introduced things I haven't really talked about too deeply, which are like seasonal theming and parity theming and different ways to structure your time in that regard. And those were things that I said, I realized, hey, there's some gaps here. How do I fill those gaps? And that was a big one. But I think the other thing, when you bring it up as a practice, the key point about the productivity diet is I wanted to write a book that illustrated that you can't life hack your way through life,
Mm,
and when people think of the term productivity, they think of, efficiency and effectiveness. And I'm pretty clear that those are byproducts of being productive. They are not productivity is the active link between intention and attention. And of course, reflection and action are in there as well. But I wanted to be clear that the term diet is often misunderstood. When people hear the term diet, they think, "Oh, I'm going to go on a diet, a crash diet, fad diet, like all these things that they do for a temporary period of time." And but the real benefit of using diet in the idea of a lifestyle is that it's something that you sustain. There is some
yeah,
flexibility built into it, and you want to build it so it's durable. And obviously, the simpler it is, the easier it's going to be for you to stick to it. So when I think about the term diet, it wasn't, hey, here's some quick fixes, here's some ways to hack all of your stuff. It's, hey, this is a lifestyle, and I think that lifestyle and practice are interchangeable in that regard.
yeah. I think it's interesting. You talked about in the book about the ingredients. You have your time theming, attention paths, and reflective practice. And so it kind of put me in mind with the diet theme of it's about knowing you need the right balance of proteins and carbohydrates. You kind of, it is that sustainable. You can, you don't want to binge eat. You don't want to kind of eat just the same thing. You've got to find that medium which gives you variety, gives you all the right nutrients, etc. And I think, it is that blending, that continual kind of blending and finding different ways to put things together that makes things interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is tricky about any framework or system is understanding that it's not static. Like for example, when someone is really adopting something like theming their time, and they try to make it so that they're going to do all 7 days or they're going to do all 12 months, they come across some things that might throw them for a loop. Or
Mm.
that's one thing that can happen. And of course, the whole house of cards falls apart. I think another thing that can happen is that people misunderstand. Oh, so a daily theme means the only thing I work on that day is this thing. No, no, no. It's just about giving you a waypoint, a compass, an overarching focus. And the thing about that is that that's hard for people. The nuance is hard. I get it. Like the nuance is hard for these sort of things. So for some people, using time theming is probably the thing that they use the most out of the three elements of time crafting. Others is attention pass. Like, hey, you know what? I'm driven by my to-do list. I want to know how many things I can get done in 5 minutes or less. Oh, here's 12 5-minute tasks, right? Like time-based attention pass or energy-based or activity-based. And I go into that as well. But it's never going to be fully static. The elements themselves are static. Like, okay, well, I can rely on monthly theming for this, or I can rely on, uh, resource-based attention pass for this, but those will change. As we make our way through time, which is
Yeah.
why it's called time crafting, we craft it. So
Yeah.
to me, I think if you go into the book with that in mind and you can return to it again and again as time passes, your relationship with time will only get better because you realize that I'm going to be crafting time until I no longer have time left.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that was the idea of it being adaptable. Your diet has to productivity diet has to be adaptable, or will be adaptable and flexible. I mean, I think that comes through really strongly, and of course, you've got a big theme about making it sustainable as you go through the book. And the other thing I really picked up from the book, and I think it's you often talking about intention, and I kind of think of it in terms of deliberateness, and it certainly made me think in terms of, particularly in terms of the reflective part is that it's very easy to do things sort of accidentally.
Mm.
And sometimes you're doing the right things accidentally, actually, and it's perfectly fine. But really, you want to be in a position where you're doing things deliberately, that you know why you're doing them. And I think that that's probably something I got from the book myself, was the idea that making my reflective practice more deliberate. But that comes through all of them, the time theming, the attention passes, all about constantly checking in with yourself to make sure that you're being deliberate about what you're doing and why you're doing it in the way you're doing it, which I thought was a very strong message.
It is really important for people to understand. Just like again, when you're doing exercise or you're building a lifestyle, a diet plan, is this still working? You plateau at certain points when you're on a, I didn't, one thing I wanted to be careful with this book was not to do the same thing I did with my first book, The Front Nine, which was talk too much about something I didn't know about, which was golf. I used golf as a metaphor and it did not land as well as I would have hoped. I think when I wrote that book, I was trying to Pressfield my way through it because Pressfield wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance. I'm like, oh, well, and there are some really strong cases to use golf as a metaphor, but you better know what you're talking about. And what's interesting is I know this innately from my time in comedy is that the way you can satirize or parody something, you better know a lot about it or it's going to fall flat. And so I think that when you start to think about all of these pieces, the elements of time crafting, and you're looking at it from the vantage point of, okay, is this still working? It's the same thing you would do when you are, exercising or when you are, eating, trying to develop a proper healthy diet, a lifestyle, all that stuff. You have to check in with yourself. There's a reason why you weigh yourself regularly. There's a reason why you check in and see, oh, well, am I making incremental improvements with my workouts? Like quantity does matter. But if you're only checking in on those numbers, and by the way, that's another interesting thing is I know when I have done exercise programs, is if you get too obsessed with your weight, you're missing the point because the numbers will and again, I might butcher this, but a pound of fat weighs as much as a pound of muscle, right? They're both a pound, but you might look in the mirror and go, why? I don't really look all that, and it's because there's some changes going on, right? So I think that with that reflective practice piece, which I have beat that drum so many times. I think that that's, even if you're not somebody who's going to journal, in terms of in-depth kind of morning pages style, but you're going to check in with yourself, even with just some simple prompts. It'll allow you to align those things like, am I using my time, or am I using the time that I have, or this relationship that I have? Is it working for me right now? If not, why? And I think that it doesn't take a lot of time to do that once you start doing it, like anything else. It's just the getting started with it and building from there. That's where we often get, we either fall down, or we just, we find a reason not to proceed, because it takes longer at first, like anything else. But then over time, you get better at it, you get faster at it. And there are tools that can help you with this now. I mean, some people I know are, there's a member of our community that's using AI to help with that reflective practice as well. And I think that there are some benefits to using AI in these instances to keep you from getting stuck or getting in your own way. And I think that those check-ins they're important, and optically you feel like they may be taking more time, and that you may not get them to the point where you can go through them fairly quickly. But the more you practice something, the better you're going to get at it.
There's often a tendency as well, I think, I say, again, speak for myself, but to want to rush a little bit. You want more results than you can get, more quickly than you can get them, in a way. And so there's a tendency then, I think, to reflect and maybe not take quite enough notice of your reflections, because they're maybe not moving you forward as fast as you'd like to. And so then you start to throw everything out and change things around again. And really, you just want to keep going a bit more.
Yeah. I by the way, Oliver Berkman wrote a great book. Was it 4,000 weeks?
4,000 weeks. Yeah.
And when I read that book, which I was by the time that book came out, this book was pretty much dialed in for the most part. And I read it and I just kept nodding my head throughout, because I was like Oliver too, in a lot of ways. Like, I was the guy that wrote for Lifehacker, that looked at all the hacks and tried to do all the things in one fell swoop. And I'm still, I still do that from time to time. We're human. Like, I will explore the fancy new apps. I will look at the shiny new things. But the nice thing about having a framework or an approach like this in place is you can check yourself regularly, like having that daily theme when I wake up in the morning and going, oh, right, what's today? Today is, what is it called? Today is today's connection day as we're recording this. Okay, so what are my connection tasks? Like, to get me back on course. I think that that's a really key point. And I think the danger that a lot of people have, which I try to help people with in this book, in the first part when I talk about mindset, is this idea of absolutes are a problem. You try to take on too much at once, you're going to run into issues. Like, kind of clear the decks a bit. And then that way, when you are adopting these, these practices, these elements, all of this stuff, developing your own productivity diet, you won't fall down nearly as much, or you'll catch yourself as you are falling. Yeah. And then that way you can course correct quickly.
Yeah. And John's made a nice point in the chat, really, about the way that as the time crafting process evolves in the book, it's clearly developmental, and there's this sort of grace within it, and this non-judgmental or non-blame approach. It's very clear, really, that things are going to change, and you need them to change, and things might not all work right first time, and so you adjust your themes, or you focus on a different attention path. And I think that it's almost like a permission, if you like, to just experiment and give it a go, and not be too concerned if things aren't exactly as you think they're going to be. I think that's built in as well, isn't it?
I do like the grace idea, which I guess is fitting since my daughter's name is Grace, and I think a lot about it. But when he mentions grace margin, I find, and then again, this goes back to some of my contemporaries and colleagues who talk about using the margin, like, finding space in the margins and finding. And I think that that's important, again, to a point. I think a lot of times when we have margin, the space is there for a reason, and to let it be space. And because time and space are, mean, what's that John Cleese? I think you and I have talked about this before, the John Cleese talk. I know I've mentioned it before. The
Yeah.
idea of, in order to be truly creative and create truly great things, you need both time and space. If you have too much
Yeah,
time
that's
and
right.
not,
Yeah.
if you have too much time and not enough space, then you'll feel cramped. And if you have a lot of space but no time, you'll feel rushed. And this is a talk that John Cleese did a number of years ago. I'll see if I can find it and throw it in the show notes. But I think that we often, if you manage your relationship with time, then by virtue of that, you're going to be better at managing your relationship with space. And those two things are connected.
Yeah, I think the margin is, I think of it as buffer as well. You see so many people kind of seem to try and go through life without any buffer or margin at all. And then of course it just takes one little thing to throw you in and everything falls apart. So I think it is tremendously important. And I think again, within the book, when you talk about, I wrote down a quote somewhere about rest. Yeah, it's about understanding that rest is an investment. And I think that rest isn't the same as margin, but it's kind of like just giving yourself the space to let things develop and unfold and recharge. And I do think that's really
Well,
important.
I think margin is the space where you can take the action of rest, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where, and again, rest doesn't have to be, I'm going to take a nap, I'm going to go. Like, rest could be, I'm going to do lower energy things. How do I know what my lower energy things are? Oh, right, I have this attention path that I can
Yeah.
follow. And even still, that's the other thing that I think doesn't get taken into account as much, is how we feel determines both the quality and quantity of what we do. And we hear a lot about, well, that's fine, don't worry about how you feel. Well, no, but we're human, right? Like, so we do have to take that into account. So how do we take it into account where we try not to forsake quantity and or quality in the process, right? And if you have something like, as a night owl, I'm like, okay, I know darn well that I'm not going to be able to do a lot of amazing work early in the day. How do I do work early in the day? Then, like, what do I do? Oh, here's what I do. And if I can fill that space, right, with the right tasks based on the variety of factors I know to be certain true about me, then from there, even if I have those tasks that pop up that I wouldn't normally do in the morning, I still have the reserves to do them, right? Like, I know that when you and I are having a conversation at 8 o'clock in the morning, my time, I have nothing else to think about, nothing else to focus on. And not only that, I can feed off the energy of what's going on, right? So there is that to take into account. And I learned that from when I was doing theater and comedy and performance is, if you have a small audience. And I mean, I did shows with my comedy troupe back when we were starting it, where there were more people in the troupe that were in the than were actually in the audience, and that's a really hard thing to do because there's no energy to fall off. But even if you have an audience that is bigger than you and they're not animated, you can still field off the sheer numbers of people because they're there for a reason, right? So the work is there for a reason. And whether it's an external factor or an internal factor, and sometimes it's a bit of both, if you have the wherewithal to point yourself in that direction, which is, hey, what I know that this kind of task comes up regularly, can I bundle it with others and create a theme out of it? Or, hey, yeah, I know I'm only good in the afternoons for writing, so I'm going to block off that time and create boundaries around it so that nobody can interrupt me during that time. So be it. I think that you have to think about those things. And the only way you can do that is, again, in those margins, in that space. And often, sometimes when you rest, you can think about that. Hey, what does that look like? And to me, I don't think we invest enough of our effort and enough of our attention on that, because we live in a world that's constantly asking us to act, like make this, make that. And near the end of the book, I kind of finally touch on the term productiveness, that I prefer to productivity, which is the state of being productive, as opposed to productivity, which is the activity of producing. I mean, I've been in this business and been around long enough to know that productivity is the word that everybody uses, but it wasn't always the word that people used. And I think that if you can spend more time in that state, and if you build, a framework out of the elements I've given you, and you don't have to do all of it, obviously, you can be in that state a lot more often, and with a lot more concentration.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be quite good to. I've got a few sort of questions in a way about the
Please.
individual pieces. So let's just dig into one or two of those. In terms of time theming, I mean, you suggesting putting forward approaches where you maybe can have daily themes or weekly themes, horizontal themes across multiple days, a monthly, seasonal, and then your annual axiom. Um, it's sort of interesting, really, because you could tackle it by just thinking, right, I'm going to start daily theming or horizontally theming. But it struck me the more I sort of thought about it, the more I've kind of played with these ideas myself, is that you can go from the short time scales to the long time scales, but really, then you maybe don't have your intention or your direction set well enough. So, what do you think about kind of starting on the big time scale and coming down versus going the other way?
That was intentional. It was intentional to build something that could give you a top down or bottom up kind of approach. I remember talking to my old podcast partner, Michael Schechter, when we were doing our shows. And one of the things he said when I was talking about time crafting was, some people just want to get through today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, so many systems out there force you to start at the bigger, And I remember the first program I ever took was Tony Robbins's Time of Your Life program. That was the first time management program I ever took. I remember I was up late at night, and back when infomercials were still a thing, and I saw his program, and I didn't buy the one that was on the air at that time, but he did have a time management program, and I bought it off eBay. It came in like the big old plastic kind of cases and had
cassette
CDs.
tapes or something.
It was CDs, but it still came in this giant, which packaging mattered, I guess, right? And so I remember that when I was going through that program, and I think all of his programs are like this, and this is, again, not a judgment, it's just I noticed it, was you have to start from the biggest intentions. Like, what's your life goal? What's your big thing? And I know from working with clients and working with individuals, and that conversation I had with Michael Schechter, is sometimes people are just like, I need to get through today so I can get to the clearing and then do this stuff. And what I find when people start to adopt time crafting is they tend to start there. They tend to start with the smaller increments of time. And then once they get that flow going, then they may even skip monthly and seasonal and go right to annual axiom. Okay, well, now, and then they can fill it in from the middle if they want. So that was very intentional. I think you can approach it from, hey, what's my annual axiom? Okay, what monthly themes? And when we do this thing called the Ready Retreat in our community, and we're coming up to doing one where we're going to take it outside the community for the first time, like really with a solid effort. We ask you to start from the bigger, right? Hey, what's your, take a look at a larger swath of time, and it could be a whole year, it could be 6 months, it could be a season, whatever you want it to be, and then narrow it down. But for most of those people, they already have some form of daily theming or horizontal theming in place, so they can just apply, oh, well, my monthly theme for this month is to work on a book. Okay, well, I have a writing time that's horizontal Monday through Friday, so I guess that's what I'm going to be focusing on, right? My overarching focus for the next month is to work on the book during that writing time. Boom. So I wanted to make sure that you could tackle it from either direction, but the only other program I've ever really noticed, or framework, or whatever you want to call it, that does this is Getting Things Done. Like David Allen started, like, what's the next action, right? And then he goes to the horizons of focus. I think the hard part about GTD for a lot of people is then they get so caught in the action phase that they end up, what a term that often GTDers use is, they end up polishing the runway. There's other horizons of focus.
You never get to high level. Yeah.
So I think when you're using theming and attention paths together, you can get a bit more lift. That's my thought around it. And I think this has a lot to do with, for those that have read Getting Things Done, and there's some people here live that have definitely read it, contexts were always a tricky part for a lot of people. Like, what's a context? And it, because it was so vast, like the definition of what a context could be. And even David and Al and I have talked, like a context could be this fountain pen that I'm using, right? Like this is a context. Like I will use this fountain pen for these things. But there's so many options that it doesn't really whittle it down or filter it. And with attention pass, there's clear filtration. Hey, it's time, it's resource, it's energy. I think with that, that helps you get that lift. That helps you kind of get through that, as opposed to getting caught in the weeds of, okay, well, I've got all these lists wrapped around context, or I've got all these lists, and that's really what you're managing. I think I try to avoid that. I still think people get caught in that, but I think it's an easier lift.
Well, they're not. I mean, I suppose it's tactics versus strategy in a way, really, isn't it? And you kind of need to know how to play the game before you can kind of think about your strategy in the game. But
Yeah.
I think we're sort of moving nicely into attention paths there. Really, do you kind of decide your attention paths kind of in the moment, or is it something? I mean, because you can plan a certain extent with, say, energy, or I was trying to work out the best way or to think of those.
So the way I look at it, and again, they're built in a way that when you look at them, the order spells the term treat, right? Time, resource, which is my idea behind that is if you use attention pass, you treat your attention, and therefore you're working yourself better. But each of them kind of are based on quantity, and as you scale up, they become more qualitative. So time is very quantity oriented, not only by virtue of the fact it's numerically counted, but also, hey, how many 5-minute tasks can I get done, which I alluded to earlier? I've only got 30 minutes. Let me see how many I can get 2 15-minute tasks done in that time, which pulls your attention away from things like email or social media and into like what you intended to do. What I feel attention paths are good for is there's twofold. Number one, when you feel like your attention is drifting from within the frame that time exists. So like if you've got a time theme, let's say today I have connection, and I start to feel tired, I now have a choice. Do I keep going down the path of that themed time period, which is connection, or do I look at low energy or low intensity tasks because I'm not feeling 100%? The golden goose would be, oh my God, I have low energy connection tasks that I could do, and boom, those are the ones I should definitely do. So I don't think that in the moment is when you decide what attention path to follow, but you do need to decide what attention paths are best for you prior to that. So that's why a lot of people will start with time. Time is a big one. Resource is the closest thing to like the core definition of contexts in getting things done.
It could be where you are or what tools you've got.
Place, thing, right. And notice how both of those are like, one's very, very heavily skewed towards quantity, and then resource is kind of mixed, but it leans quantity. Like how many things can I get done in an email? How many Excel tasks can I do? How many things can I talk to Tim about, right? Like it still leans quantity. But then energy is where it starts to balance, right? Because with energy, you could do a lot of low energy tasks and you're listening to your energy and still being productive. Or you could be listening to your energy and you're trying to do high energy tasks when you have low energy. So you're not listening to your energy rather, and you're not very productive, right? The quality suffers, right? So then we go into activity, which is very much verb driven: writing, studying, reading, errand running. Those ones I actually think are ones that people, if they're adopting attention paths, should look at first before energy, because you can kind of know how you feel. I feel tired. I feel this. I feel that. But activity, those are like, what are the activities I commonly do? I commonly write. I commonly read. I commonly do this.
And then plan for those a bit more. Yeah.
Right, because you'll batch those, right? Like I'm going to batch my writing tasks. I'm going to batch, and they fit nicely into a theme, which, by the way, theme is the highest level of quality because it's pure intent, pure concentration. And often they are activities of some sort. Like connection is a form of activity. I'm going to connect with someone. There's a verb there. Editing, which is my daily theme for Wednesday, that's an activity. So more often than not, your themes will actually be driven by an activity type. Sometimes they're driven by, like, I know some people use projects and so on and so forth, and that's fine. But my point is that I think that sitting down and going, okay, what are my common activities? If you start there and then you pick 3 increments of time, a short, a medium, and a long, you could just start from there and then trust your energy. Go, okay, oh, I know this is a low energy task. Put a down arrow next to it or whatever. That part takes some finessing, but once you've got it, then you can kind of say, oh, all right, I'm tired, and it's, I have 5 minutes. Do I have any 5-minute tasks I can do when I'm tired? Or, I'm writing and I have a lot of energy. What are my high energy or high intensity writing tasks that I can do? So you can start to mesh these things together. And it's, again, very dynamic. But you can start with those. I think the best thing to do, and the easiest way to do it, is to go look at your list right now. If you see a lot of verbs, first off, you should see verbs at the front of your list no matter what, right? Every task should start with a verb by virtue of just giving your brain a break, so it doesn't have to go, what is this? What do I do? So look at and see the common verbs. If you see common verbs, that's an activity-based attention path. And then from there, you could start there. So I think that those 3, and by the way, when you start with those 3, you're going to lean quality, and you won't forsake quantity in the process because you've got something to take care of when you're I got to get a bunch of stuff done. Okay, let me hit those time-based ones. Let me hit those energy-based ones.
Yeah. Well, and you're always doing something that fits your time, your energy. You're always able to keep on the go in that way. Let's just quickly move on to a little bit about reflective practice, which to me, I think in a way, reflective practice becomes the key in the end, because it's the one that brings about the deliberateness and the flexibility, the adaptation. And I really liked
it involves both. It involves both. It involves both intention and attention. Like it reflection precedes and follows every action.
Yeah. And I think you make I think it's very clear, very good indication that you need. There's 3 timescales really. I mean, you pick out daily, weekly, and long term. And I think as I read that and I'm thinking about it afterwards, thinking about what I talked to you about in this chat, it seemed to me that as you make the point in the book, you can't do without any of those really. You need all 3, because one of them, daily reflection, is course correction, isn't it? It's like, am I doing the right thing at the right time? Did I do the right thing today? What should I do differently tomorrow? That weekly reflection is, if you like, your route planning. It's like, okay, so I want to get to there, but how am I going to get there? And you can't do course correction if you don't know what your route is. And then the long term is deciding the destination or the itinerary. And I think that it sort of comes out really nicely, that those 3, without one of, if you don't know where you're going, then you can't course correct. I think those 3 timescales are really useful in the reflection process.
I think the other that is both a blessing and a curse, because a lot of people struggle with the reflection piece, right? I mean, the biggest thing that I've heard about the getting things done methodology is people get stuck in the weekly review, right? Like they get stuck in that area of like, I've got so many things to look at, etc. I think the if you're going to start with reflective practice, I would absolutely start with the daily. I would start there because you're already on a course. So you start with that, build that habit. It does not take a lot of time to journal. I've said this many times before. There's an app called the 5-Minute Journal. There's a book called the 5-Minute Journal, and it asks you to do it twice per day. I'm only suggesting you do it once, whether you do it early in the morning or in the evening like I do. That's your choice. But I think the thing is, if you start there, then the prompts are easier to answer. You also have way more accessibility to things that'll trigger your memory, like photos in your phone and things like that. The prompts are easier to access. Plus, again, you're doing bit by bit, right? Every little bit you're making progress. So to me, I think that's the place to start. But you're right, like you need all of them, because if you don't have a long-term plan, then you can't map the route, and that means that you could end up going, how in the world did I get where I am now? I think that you need all 3, and journaling is like easier than ever. I mean, there's never been a time where it either hasn't been more accepted via technology, or just even culturally, it's come back into the fore with things like bullet journaling and
Yeah.
things of that nature. I think reflective practice, whether, and again, it can be dictated. It can be, you know, I mean, I can tell you right now, when I go for a walk, there is some form of reflection going on. Some of it is journaling, and some of it is just writing ideas that are coming to my head. So I think that, yeah, it is a critical part. And like I said earlier, whether you believe it or not, or whether you want to, you know, recognize this or not, you are always reflecting, just like you're always making choices. Before and every action, you are doing some kind of micro reflection. Like, should I do this? How did that go? Should I do this? How did that go? Like those, what happened? Like all that stuff is happening. I'm just asking you to be, as you pointed out earlier, deliberate about it.
Deliberate, yeah. I mean, I think I can see how you can just sort of start with a daily reflection, because of course through thinking about how a day's gone, where it might go different, could have gone differently, you might make you think about what your course is going to be, or where you know, oh, I don't really know why I'm doing this. I'll
You
think, you know,
see,
maybe I'll.
you see
So it could
patterns
emerge.
too. You see patterns. Yeah, patterns
Yeah,
emerge
yeah,
far quicker when you're doing it daily. Like weekly, you'll see some patterns, but you may not react as quickly, right? It's not, again, it's like going, to use the traveling metaphor. If you wait too long, you're like, oh man, I got to turn around now, right? Like I go all the way back there. Versus if you're course correcting consistently, and daily would be like making incremental progress. Now, oh shoot, I should have got off at this exit, or oh, I've got to get up. I got to get off at this exit up here.
yeah.
It is, if you do that, you'll see patterns. Like, why am I not doing this? Or why am I doing this? Or man, and again, one of the things I've noticed is I didn't eat very healthily today. Why? Oh, right. I didn't make my, you know, I didn't have my oatmeal prepped from the night before. This is really important. I should do this, right? And that's a quick correction that I can make. So yeah, I think daily is the easiest, and it's also the most, you'll see the quickest results if you start with daily.
Well, yeah. And also, I mean, you give the suggestion in the book of the stop, start, continue approach. Like you say, reflective practice daily or anytime. It doesn't have to be writing pages and pages of you know, text and things. It can just be like, you know, yeah, okay, so think about today. What do I want to not do? You know, what should I stop? What shall I start doing because I haven't done it? And what should I think about doing? Or there's the and or the plus minus next is
Yes.
another.
Yeah.
You know, the similar things are just three very simple prompts, and that's all it needs to be, is like one line, one sentence, but it gets you going, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of our time, I think. So I think I'll just ask you a little bit, I think, about the process. You using the productivity diet theme a little bit. You chose to start off the process of writing this book using a Kickstarter campaign,
Yep.
which I think gave you a huge portion. We think keep in food in terms of a huge portion of accountability.
Yeah.
And I think I just wondered whether how your relationship with that, you know, whether it changed as you went through.
It
When,
did.
did it fill you up so much you couldn't have a second helping of dessert, or did it cleanse your palate beautifully so that the words all flowed?
I would say that if we're going to use the food metaphor, I bit off more than I could chew is probably the better way to put it.
The danger with accountability, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I think what happened, I mean, so this book was a Kickstarter campaign in 2023. And the draft was written, and my plan was to work with a publisher that could elevate it to, you know, the highest quality of output. I didn't know enough about what I could do on my own, and I had a lot of other irons in the fire too. So I wanted to kind of get the best of both worlds. The publishing idea of traditional publishing, where you hand it off and they reflect it back to you, et cetera, and could maintain what I was doing. I should have gone in with a bit more of I was a bit naive in terms of what could happen. The good news is, I mean, I hit my goal. Like it was, which was great. But I chose a partner that we weren't aligned in, like expectations weren't clear, and it caused friction I mean, that's over now, and I'm glad it is. Um, but I would recommend that if somebody is wanting to use a crowdfunding model for their book, it is a great way to do it, because you get proof of, it validates your idea. But the biggest thing is you can't take your eye off the ball, because it needs to be the thing. And you can't rely on anyone else as you being the self-published author to do the stuff
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I got the book to where I wanted it to be. And once I got that, then I was able to proceed. But money had been invested, and, by the time the book is fully delivered, because we're still doing the audiobook and the workbook that we hit a stretch goal to get the workbook as well. Once the campaign is fully done and everyone has their rewards, because as we're recording this, the printer is going to get me the books that I'm going to then mail off to all of the people who bought physical books. Basically, if you're going to do this, there's no reason why you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
You don't need to have a hybrid publisher partner or whatever. I could tell you that if you're going to try to go traditionally published, you're going to be waiting a couple of years for your book to come out which is fine if that's what you want, absolutely, and if that's your goal to have a traditionally published book. But for me, it was just about getting this thing out in the world, because it had been a long time that this book is long overdue, and so I took it back. I'm proud of what I was able to put together. And what it did by doing this is I was able to. The good news is in the background, other projects came to life, as well as the next book, which is due to the publisher in June. So, the first draft is due in like 6 weeks. So the good news is that draft is pretty much done. It just needs to be properly collated. And I'm excited for that one, because that book is scheduled. We're aiming for an early 2026 release for that book. So the initial marketing and all that stuff that happened with the Kickstarter campaign, that luster and sheen is worn off. I didn't build on that momentum. However, now I've got a book that I can basically promote all the way through till the end of this year. And then the next book will be coming out early next year. And I think both those books together will be nice companion pieces too, which is kind of nice. But yeah, if you're going to take on a project like a Kickstarter and you want to use it to crowdfund whatever it is you want to do, that needs to be the thing that overrides all other things. And you'll need to create better boundaries than I did. I mean, I needed to, take my own medicine on this, better boundaries than I did around other things that could infiltrate, based on your assumptions that, this will be done without issue, or this will be done without issue.
But there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things on there, because there's the interaction with another agency or a publisher or whatever.
Yep.
That's a sort of different thing in a way. And then there's the like I say, the big dose or big helping portion of accountability. Certainly, for some people, they really, without that. Outside accountability, nothing would get done.
And I think the thing is that if you have too many things going on, you have competing outside external demands that you need to, for lack of a better term, this is where prioritization and ranking come. Like, this should have been the thing, and for the most part, it was the right. But all the other elements that didn't come together as quickly, and some didn't come together at all, that was an issue. So, lesson learned. For a while, I did get very disgruntled around the whole process, to the point where it did get to the point where I was not happy. Like, I look at the book project and go, ugh, like, that's where it got to. But once I got a physical copy of this thing and saw it finished, I'm like, okay, all right, here it is. It's worth it. And by the way, I don't think that that's unique to me, and I don't think it's unique to somebody on Kickstarter, because I know that there's people who've worked with traditional publishers, and the same thing can happen. So we touched on this off the top. Once the book is written and out in the world, it's no longer yours. It's really not. And so my hope is that people who pick up this book are gonna take it. And from the comments and the feedback I've gotten so far, people are really enjoying it. Take it and hopefully it's gonna. I want to get this book in as many hands as possible, and I want them to benefit from it. I don't need
Mm.
to be a New York Times bestseller or anything like that. I want to get the book into as many hands as
Yeah,
possible because I think it can help a lot of people to improve their relationship with
yeah,
time.
yeah. And I think as we touched on in the conversation, I think that flexibility and the sort of adaptiveness, balance. That's the for me it was deliberate. The deliberate slash intentional. Yeah, that's a huge part of time crafting. Adaptable slash flexible, and balanced slash sustainable. It's like that's a very healthy kind of framework philosophy, I think, for people to adopt. And so it's a good, if you're floundering around a bit with tactics too much, well, then I think this approach can give you, as John said in the chat, really, it gives you that space to and permission to kind of find your own way through it. So yeah, it's
And it's funny, Tim, as I'm looking at this, like my beginning started at Costco, and this is a book that like definitely like it's printed locally. This one that I'm holding
yeah,
right here,
nice,
it's got
yeah,
that vibe to it, like like hey, this is a no frills like kind of. I was very careful about, and I've read a lot of books, trying to avoid a lot of anecdotal stuff in here, and we've
yeah,
talked about this privately as well. Like,
yeah,
I wanted to avoid like the same story. I wanted it to be very actionable. I mean, it's
mm,
called a practical guide. I want to be practical and
mm,
actionable. And so removing a lot of the anecdotal stuff that you may read in other books or so on and so forth, I wanted to make sure was out of there. And that I'm really kind of happy about because, you know, I think sometimes you need those in these books, but
mm.
I also know that it can be overdone
It can be quite distracting.
just to
Yeah.
fill pages like this. I think
Mm,
every page matters in this book, so
mm.
that's another thing I'm really proud of as well.
But I think just one comment about your hard copy. I think that one of the issues I think with writing or trying to write things is that the words go into the computer and they sit in memory somewhere, and there's nothing tangible to get hold of. So I can imagine, that moment when you get your physical copy, properly printed physical copy, you've got that in your hands. Then there's something tangible, something physical there
Yeah,
that's come out of your work, and that's a really satisfying feeling, I think. Yeah,
it is, and you have to be willing to for that payoff because it's very easy for writers to publish on social media and blog posts and things like that because you get that instant gratification. You don't get that with a book. You don't,
mm.
because you have to. It's a very
You can pick it
solitary.
up though.
You can't pick you. Well, no, when it's done, you can pick it up, but
Yeah,
until it's
exactly.
done, you can't. So
Yeah.
I actually made a practice with this most recent book to when I finish a chapter to print it off
Mm.
so I can physically hold it and go
See it
through it.
there.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean I'm editing it or anything like that, but I'm just there it is. Like I'm seeing the physical manifestation
Yeah.
of the book being built as opposed
Yeah.
to the digital manifestation. That
Yeah.
that has been massively helpful. So if you're a
Yeah.
writer out there listening to this, like if you don't already have a printer, get a laser printer first off, or it's going to kill your ink. But get a laser printer. We've had one for like they last forever, and I will print off physical chapters of the book and watch it accumulate, even if it's a first draft. So that way I can see, like you would if you were typing it on a typewriter. There's something about seeing
Mm.
that progress that's visible that says, "Oh, I'm that much closer," or "This is what this looks like so far." That to me has been massively helpful with this latest project.
Mm. Yeah. Or you could, as we've got in the chat, you can write it by hand as well, which is it's an even more physical kind of like
It, it
organic
is.
way of doing things. Yeah.
It is, but I do like my speed that I can have with typing
Yeah.
and with. I do love writing. I mean, I can tell you, I have index cards like crazy for this book. I kind of follow Ryan Holiday's kind of method of getting
Mm.
index cards and stuff. But yeah, definitely. And I mean, for those of you who've listened for a long time, you know how much I love my fountain pen. So I'm not averse to using handwritten notes for sure.
Okay. Well, Mike, I think it's been a really enjoyable conversation, and to sort of pick apart a few of the ideas in the book and to explore a little bit more of your thoughts behind them all. I've certainly really enjoyed it. I guess there might be people listening who want to follow things up and want to find out more about your work and the ideas within the book.
Well, you can find me here on this podcast every week, but also you can get the book at mikevardy.com/lit, Lit, and it's sold wherever you get books. It's actually available in libraries and all that stuff. And if you go to a bookstore and they don't have it, they can get it. So if you want to go to an independent bookstore and say, hey, you know what, I want to pick up this book, it's available. They can pick it up. They can order it. So if you don't want to order through the traditional Amazons or any of those, and you want to go to your independent bookstore and get it, just walk up and say, I want a copy of the Productivity Diet. Can you get it in? I'd love to get it into as many bookstores as possible as well. So that's where I recommend you go. We have lots of independent bookstores here in Victoria where I live, and they're all going to carry it. So, I hope that wherever you are, you can pick up a copy of the book. And right now, it's as of this recording, it's available in ebook, paperback. The audiobook is coming, and there will be eventually a companion workbook to go with it. It's going to go out to the backers first that get it, and then we'll have that available for release as well.
Yeah, it could be a weekly theme for next week for somebody to get hold of the Productivity Diet.
There you go.
Anyway,
Hey,
yeah,
Tim.
thanks very much, Mike.
Thank you so much for doing this, Tim. For those that Tim, share where people can read your work, because you're doing some really cool stuff online.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, my job is I'm a university lecturer, and I teach oceanography and meteorology. Quite why I teach those subjects, I've never really been able to work out, but that's what I do in my day job. But I kind of like to describe myself as also as a kind of writer, poet, artist, various other things I've discovered in the last couple of years. So I guess I'm trying to put everything these days on my blog, which is Tim O'Hare, TIMOHARE.blog. And also you can find, most of my art there as well, but I've also got an Instagram account that is Tim O'Hare Art. So yeah, if anyone wants to pop in and see any of my own work, that'd be great. Maybe I'm a little bit behind you in time, Mike, but I'm as you know, I've been writing my own book, so that one might be available to other people to read at some point as well in the future.
I hope it is. And by the way, everybody that's in the comments right now are congratulating you on this is your first time hosting a podcast, right? So there you go.
Absolutely, yeah. I always game for trying something new, but yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And we, again, if you have a chance, pick up the book. Check out Tim's stuff. All this will be released in the episode. There'll be show notes, all that stuff. We'll wrap up the live stream now. Thanks again, Tim. I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Mike. All right.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.